Today on the Lazy RPG Talk Show, we have a bunch of news coming out of Gencon. We have the ENNIE Winners from this year's ENNIEs. Monte Games is coming out with a new Cypher Evolved system. There's a whole bunch of new Daggerheart stuff. Brennan Mulligan is going to be the GM for Season 4 of Critical Role. Pathfinder Abomination Vaults, a Pathfinder product, is now available on D&D Beyond. There's new Forgotten Realms downloadable content for the upcoming Forgotten Realms products on D&D Beyond. Welcome back. We have the new head of Dungeons & Dragons has a letter that he put out on D&D Beyond. We're going to talk about that and dive into it. And I got big thoughts to share on that. We're going to look at 5 scenes. How can you break your prep down to just kind of focusing on the next 5 scenes that you're going to run in your next game? And we have more questions from the Patreon Q&A, all today on the Lazy RPG Talk Show. I'm Mike Shea, your pal from Sly Flourish, here to talk about all things in tabletop role-playing games. Last week on Sly Flourish, I posted the article called 10 Easy Heist Encounters. Nice, fun, short article that came from a conversation we had on the Sly Flourish Discord server some months ago. You can join the Discord server by becoming a patron of Sly Flourish, and you can get articles like this sent directly to your inbox by joining the Sly Flourish newsletter. You will find links in the show notes for both of those things. This is a really fun thing of like, what kind of fun encounters could occur while you're in the middle of a heist, right? You're in the middle of a location, things are happening. This one was specific to kind of goblinoid sort of stuff. We really enjoyed this one. The goblin stumbles through struggling with a big pot. And then we have a bonus list of things in the goblin's pot: mimic pot, bell collection, disgruntled frogs, favorite NPC's head, right? All kinds of fun stuff. So that was a nice short article. That was last week's article. I'm making up for the fact that it was a short article with next week's article, which again, you can get by joining the Sly Flourish newsletter. Totally free to sign up. Get it emailed directly to your inbox. It's really worth doing. Called Lazy World Building. Built on the question where people have asked, hey, how do you do world building in a lazy way? So we have a lot. This is a longer conversation on the whole topic of lazy world building. This is, if you're watching this on YouTube, it is, or listening to the podcast, it is available on Sly Flourish right now. You can also get it sent to you as a newsletter by joining the newsletter. So if you want to learn more about ways to build worlds in a lazy way, you can do that. Patrons of Sly Flourish have access to the 5e Artisanal Database, a suite of tools to help you run your 5th edition games. Every week I've been showing off one of the various tools that they've got, and now we're going to look at the Map Annotator. A lot of these tools, maybe all of these tools, are the kind of tools that I know I need. Right? These are tools that I need in order to help me prep and run my games. So I built a lot of tools that are designed specifically to help me run it. I showed the token maker last time when I need to make VTT tokens, things like quick monster stats, combat tracker, encounter calculator, dice roller. These are all things that I like. These are just the tools. And of course, there's databases of monster spells and magic items. Entire 5e rule sets, multiple 5e entire rule sets, all available here, and a bunch of random generators, which I use every week. I'm always using the random generators for stuff. So these are all the tools that are available. Again, you get it by becoming a patron of Sly Flourish. So the Map Annotator, you click it, you load a map. We are going to load this Dyson map. It's got a little zoom feature so that you can do it. And then we are going to drop a label and we're going to say throne room. Let's see, crypt? Yeah, throne room. Why not? But we need way bigger pixel size for that. Let's try 100. There we go. 100 pixel size is the right pixel size. And so you can create a label and you can drop it on the map. And we could say treasure vault. And we're going to do 100 and go boop. And so a neat thing is it's specifically designed so that the label has a big outline around it. So you can drop it on the sides of things and the text is still very legible. That was one of the designs here. So it's not designed to make the absolute prettiest map ever. We could say Hall of Statues, and we will put that down here, boop, right, and drop that in, and then we'll say mosaic fresco hall, fresco hall, boop, and we could say mural of planar travel, boop. We'll have a spawn breeding ground, breeding pool, boop, right, and now you've got, so you can annotate a map very, very quickly. You can then, of course, export your annotated map, which drops it into, and I will open up a new window here, which drops out the annotations already done, ready to go. You can print it out. Now you got yourself an annotated map. Super fast, super easy, designed to like get rid of having to do any kind of major image editing. You can also save your project and it dumps out a JSON file that has all the calculations of all the stuff. So if you reload this whole thing, so I just refresh the whole page, I can click load project, go to my downloads, it automatically goes to your downloads folder. And it remembered all the stuff, and it's still movable. So all the labels and everything like that are still movable. You can move everything around. All of this is happening locally on your machine. There is no server-based component to this. You can download the entire 5e artisanal monster database and run it locally on your computer. You can run this specific tool locally on your computer. None of the images, none of the labels, none of the data is ever sent to any server that I'm hosting it on. It is all happening locally in your web browser. And that way you can annotate your map, and you can make it very easy to, create a map that you can then print off and use in your game. So it was a very common feature that I needed, that I use a lot, and it's very handy for me to be able to create something like this. So this is just one of many tools that you get for joining the Sly Flourish Patreon and picking up the 5e artisanal monster database. I hope you enjoyed it. Man, did we have a lot of news coming out of Gencon. So I knew we were going to, and all week I was like, oh, what are we going to hear about Gencon? And we got a lot of interesting things that came out of Gencon, and we're going to talk about a lot of it right now. One of the things that happens every year are ENNIEs. The ENNIEs are awards given to various role-playing game products. And there's a whole slew of the different products. I have a link down in the show notes to the ENNIEs that were announced on EN World. They have links to all of the products there, which is very nice. Morris from EN World linked to all the products. So if you want to get the list together and link and see them all, these are all of the products that won various awards throughout the ENNIEs. A lot of different stuff from a lot of different publishers. So unlike last year, where I think Shadow Dark walked away with 250 ENNIEs, well-deserved ENNIEs. There's a real wide spread of different adventures, different products, different tools, different websites, different accessories, all kinds of different stuff. So, and a lot of most of these I don't know anything about. I've never actually looked at them. So it's very interesting to see the widespread range of different things that won this year. I am curious which of these really got your attention. So feel free to leave a comment or send an email or whatever and talk about the products that you have seen that won the ENNIEs that you thought were really impressive, so that I can take a deeper look into them, because I haven't really looked at a lot of these. I look at a lot of products on this show, and a lot of these I had never really seen before. So high independent focus of the stuff that they got here. So really interesting. So please let me know what things that you caught that caught your interest, and you can find a link to all of the ENNIE related winners down in the show notes below. Monte Cook Games announced, I think on Wednesday, and they've been talking about this. So I've been aware of the fact that this is coming out, of a new Cypher Evolved. So Monte Cook Games, back 10 years ago or so, close to 10 years ago, released Numenera, crowdfunded and released Numenera. Numenera being a high fantasy, high science fantasy role-playing game built with a completely unique style of gameplay called that they called the Cypher system, named after one of the elements of the game called Ciphers. They then took the Cypher system and made a Cypher rulebook that was independent of setting, and used it in multiple settings like the Strange and other settings that Monte Cook Games has published in. And they have now, after 10 years, said it's time to evolve the system, and they are working on a new one. I am very interested. So I ran a year-long Numenera. I've run a bunch of Numenera, mostly as one-shot games, but I ran a year-long Numenera campaign using the Cypher system with my Sunday group, and we loved it. I really loved it. The players, one of the funny things about the Cypher system is, as a GM, I completely fell in love with it. My players were not as in love with it as I was, and there were a few reasons why. And I'm interested to see whether or not the way that they're evolving the Cypher system helps fix some of the things that bounced off of my players when we ran it. I really wanted to love this system. I would have loved it if my players loved the system as much as I loved it as a GM. And if you want to see more, I've done videos and talked about my experiences. I will link to a video in the show notes where I give my, year-long evaluation of Cypher, what worked well for me, what worked well for my players, what didn't, where we do a good, clear guide. But one of the things that I felt like was a real problem with Cypher systems, so bad that I had players who, when they heard it, they're like, yeah, I don't want to play because of that, right? I just don't want to play that system, was a focus on loss aversion. There was this definite piece of loss aversion that took place. And what happened in particular, and they have now said that they're addressing it in the new Cypher, is that in order for you to spend resources to do cool things, you were essentially eating the same resources you needed to help shore up damage that you took. Think about it like hit points. A friend of mine said, in order to do a power attack, you have to eat your own arm. Right? You're sucking up your own hit points in order to do cool things. And it meant that you always felt like you were getting screwed. And in some cases, it was like, if you want to increase your defenses against an attack, you're burning the very resources that you would lose if you got hit. Right? And I remember in the late stages of Cypher, I had players who felt like there's nothing I can do. I'm either going to try to spend 6 to 8 points to try to lower the difficulty down to the point where I might be able to defend against it, or I'm taking 10 points of damage. So either way, I'm taking at least 8 to 10. It's probably better to take the 10, because if I take 8 and then try to lower it and then fail, I'll take 18. So it was like, you get to gamble, but the gambles are all losses, right? That was one thing. So the new Cypher version, your damage track is separate from your pools that you can spend to do things, which I think is outstanding. That's a huge improvement, that the damage that you take is on a separate track. It's tracked a separate way than the pools that you expend in order to do acts and to lower difficulties and other things like that. So that is a huge benefit. Off the top of my head, 2 other improvements that I would really like to see is, one, Cypher had this really strange thing where you would earn experience points through complications, and you could either spend those experience points to do rerolls during the game, or you could hang on to them in order to level. And it didn't make sense that you had this resource that you could either hoard to level or expend to get a reroll. And in our game, that was actually very easy. Unlike the first one, this one was very easy to house rule, that I said, you're going to get experience points for completing quests that are independent from the experience points you get from the complications in the game. The experience points you get during the game, you can spend on rerolls only, and the experience points that you get as completing quests, that actually levels your character. So we basically split XP up into 2 groups, which is, I think, an optional rule in Cypher anyway, but it was a rule that we immediately put into place because it didn't make sense that, like, oh, it'd be like if you got inspiration in D&D, but your inspiration also helped you level. Well, you would never spend it, right? Because you're like, no, I much prefer like permanent rewards are way better than independent rewards. So I'll just take losses. And then meant you never used it for the temporary thing. So that was another one. I'm curious if they fix. I'm curious if they deal with it. The other one was the complications of lowering steps. So the way Numenera works is, instead of having like plus bonuses to things like that, you have a difficulty class, a difficulty score that you're trying to beat by rolling a d20. And you can expend resources or have abilities that help you lower the steps. So an example would be, if you're facing a level 5 difficulty, the DC to beat that is a 15. It's 3 times whatever the level of the challenge is. So you might have a 15, but you're actually pretty, and let's say it's a might check, so you're using your might. You would subtract 3 might points from your might pool to lower it from a 15 to a 12. But if you have an edge, if you're good at might stuff, you can actually reduce that cost by 1 or 2, say. And now it only costs you 2 or 1 points. And you're like, well, that's worthwhile. But you don't get that edge if you try to do it twice, right? If you want to lower it 2 steps, you don't get that edge the second time. But instead, you get a flat discount of 1. And I was like, man, I had players who, after playing for a year, said, hey, I enjoyed the story and what was going on. I never understood the system. I never really understood what exactly the hell we were doing. And that just was complicated. So I'm curious how they're going to handle that. There was just, it was a weird, given how like straightforward and simple they were trying to make the game, it was this weird bit of math where you had points that you would spend to lower difficulty, edge that would subtract from the amounts of points that you would need to spend because you're good at stuff, and then sort of a default. It was the default that really threw us off. That like, oh, if you do it a second time, you don't get edge. You know, because otherwise you just reduce it over and over again. But you do get an automatic discount of 1, which is sort of like an automatic edge. That whole thing, in my opinion, needed to be simplified. So those are like 3 specific things. And I'm going to back the Kickstarter. Like, they're going to put this up on a crowdfunding campaign. I'm definitely backing the crowdfunding campaign because I love it. I love Monte Cook's work. I love the Monte Cook games. Like, their production style is really good. They've been putting out outstanding products. So I'm all in. Whether they fix the things to the point where I'll have players and groups that are like, yeah, we're interested in playing this again. That's a different story. We'll have to see. But I'm glad I got to run Numenera. I was very fond of the campaign, and I'm very eager to see what they come out with Cypher Evolved. So that was interesting. Wow, there is a lot of new Daggerheart stuff. So they had a two big, like a Daggerheart presentation and a Critical Role presentation. And wow, Daggerheart is so big. Like in the intent, I know there's, well, it's not selling like D&D and blah, blah, blah. I get it. Like D&D is in a different kind of class of RPGs, but I can tell you the amount of attention being applied to Daggerheart is huge. So much attention on this game. And I've got it. Luckily, I'm one of the people that was able to buy it before it was out of print. And now it's in print and out of print and in print and out of print. You know, but I want to run it. Like, I really want to run it. I really want to play it. I really want to see it. But the production quality is outstanding. The amount of energy they're putting to it. The idea that the two lead designers of the D&D 2024 and 5th edition line now work on Daggerheart. I don't think that can be understated, right? Like, that's a big deal. And seeing Jeremy and Chris on stage with all of the like Critical Role people talking about their focus on Daggerheart is so wild, because these guys worked on D&D for decades and now they're just fired up about Daggerheart. It's wild to see. So much attention on it. Anyway, they announced things like they are going to be having a new crowdfunding campaign. I was really curious why they didn't do a crowdfunding campaign for Daggerheart itself, because I think they would have made millions and millions and millions of dollars. But they are doing a crowdfunding campaign for class packs. And class packs are essentially like a box full of all of the cards that you need to run an entire class. And this is sort of, instead of having a player's guide that separates out the player stuff, you can buy just a single 76 card pack that has everything you need in order to run a character in it, which is really interesting. Like, that's a very different style. Like, instead of having the wizard book and everything like that, and that way players can just go buy their class pack and they have everything they need, right? They have everything they need in order to run a character. I think that is really interesting. There was other stuff like collaborations, Legends of Evantris, Dungeons and Daddies, and Bonus Action, who are producing actual plays that are using Daggerheart as their system. They announced that Chris Perkins and Jeremy Crawford said that they're doing a campaign adventure, so something along the lines of what they have done with Dungeons and Dragons before, with things like Tomb of Annihilation and Descent into Avernus and things like that they're doing one specifically for Daggerheart. And then they mentioned, and this is like another one, you're like, what? That they are working with Together Studios, which is Keith Baker, who made Eberron, to make a new campaign. They call them new campaign products, but it's a new campaign setting. So you have Jeremy Crawford, Chris Perkins, and Keith Baker, right? That are working on a new campaign setting for Daggerheart. One thing I have, and gets into like the business side of it, I really wonder what kind of contract or rights Keith Baker has with them. Is he doing the same thing he did with D&D of making an entire campaign world for another company that then he loses control over? Or does he maintain some kind of rights to the campaign world? What's interesting about that is Critical Role hung on to their campaign rights when they wrote a campaign world for Wizards of the Coast. They got to keep Exandria and all the stuff that they were doing. They still own that. So would they offer the same kind of deal? I kind of hope they do, but it's really weird. And I don't know that we'll know. I don't know that we'll know anytime soon, but it's really interesting to see, like, because the rights are a big issue, right? Like, you know, the common story, and I don't remember exactly how much it was, but that Ed Greenwood sold Forgotten Realms to Wizards to TSR for like $4,000 or something like that, right? The most expansive fantasy world outside of maybe Lord of the Rings. And he sold it for $4,000. And then he was asked, like, how do you feel about that? He's like, I feel good about it because they became the caretakers of this world. And if I hadn't sold it, then they wouldn't have. On the other hand, you got to say, like, in this day and age, I would be, if I were making like a campaign world, I would be, I don't know, they'd have to pay me a lot to give them a world that I knew I would lose access to when I was done. Like, I would, if I'm spending that kind of creative energy on something, I would want to know that that world is still something that I can build for, which is a real problem I think for Keith Baker. He's talked about it on his Patreon, that like for him to make Eberron stuff is actually really hard, because the only place that he can publish Eberron stuff really is the DM's Guild, which means you can't crowdfund it. It means that 50% of the take goes to Drive Through RPG and goes to Wizards of the Coast, and you kind of lose access. The stuff that you create there, you can't publish any other way in any other place. So I am curious about how the rights for that kind of thing work, because that's my mind kind of goes to like, hey, where do the rights for that work? But wow, And that's a big deal. Like the idea, Jeremy Crawford, Chris Perkins, Keith Baker, Jen Ellis, they're working on like new campaign worlds for Daggerheart. That's huge, right? That's huge news. So yeah, I'm very impressed and I'm excited to see where Daggerheart goes. And I really want to try it myself. Like I'm glad I own it, but I want to try it myself. In other big Critical Role / Darrington Press news is that season 4 of Critical Role got announced coming in October, and that Matt Mercer will not be the Dungeon Master. Right before this show, I watched the YouTube video, and I recommend watching it. It's really funny and interesting. And I got one funny part about it that I thought was like, really? Was that Brennan Lee Mulligan is going to be the Dungeon Master for Critical Role Campaign 4. Which I think is really, really wild, right? Like I think it's really, really wild to see that Matt Mercer is not going to be the DM. He is going to be a player in it. Nothing about, they said it's a new world, so it's not even set in Exandria. They didn't mention system. Almost everybody I talked to, I was really like, I thought it could have gone either way. But now I think it's absolutely got to be using Daggerheart. I can't imagine that they wouldn't run the system with Daggerheart, right? Now, Brendan Lee Mulligan and Matt Mercer and the whole team have been running 5th edition D&D for years, i.e. a decade. But I would be really surprised. And I put up a tiny poll up on our Discord server of like, what system do you think that they're going to use for Campaign 4? And the answer was almost unanimously Daggerheart. And seeing the amount of attention that they applied to Daggerheart during Gencon, I think it would be shocking. And again, with Chris Perkins on board and Jeremy Crawford on board making stuff for it and like the amount of energy that they're putting for it and crowdfunding campaigns, I can't imagine why they would run D&D, right? I mean, it's shocking to hear that they would be running a game that isn't D&D. But I mean, they've put all their energy into this thing. And so I would be very surprised if they didn't use Daggerheart as the system for Critical Role, but they did not announce it. That is interesting. So we're going to see where that plays out. But I think that is a really big deal. It is by far the number one streaming game, the number one live play game. And Critical Role and Darrington Press are an absolute powerhouse company. So the funny thing, if you watch the video where they announced Critical Role 4, is they had this sort of fun shtick of who's the CEO and who's going to dress up like Steve Jobs. And the spoiler for the video, at one point, Jeremy Crawford and Chris Perkins come out in a single giant turtleneck, a black turtleneck. And I had to wonder, when they sat down and said, hey, we'd love to talk to you about joining Darrington Press and becoming like the lead game designer and lead story designer for our stuff. By the way, as part of this, you're going to have to both dress up in a single giant turtleneck and go on stage at Gen Con. And we're going to put up on YouTube. And they're like, well, okay, that's not a deal breaker. $1.5 million retainer, and we'll absolutely do that, right? You wonder, like, how did that conversation go? Was that sprung on them after they joined? Like, hey, by the way, you're going to have to dress up in a giant. That I thought was kind of funny. And also knowing that, I mean, we've heard that, like, Chris Perkins isn't super excited about being on stage on things like that. It's very nerve-wracking. Hey, by the way, you're going to do it, but you're going to have to dress up. Now, I guess he's got his partner, Jeremy Crawford, next to him. So, it's spread apart. But they were like some giant RPG designer Etten that came out on stage. So it was funny. But I was also like, I wonder how that conversation took place in the background. Wild stuff going on for Critical Role Season 4. Other wild things that have been going on. And this one, I have 3 sort of topics that are all tied together that we're gonna talk about today. One of them is another big, like, this is up there with, wow, if you recall last week I talked about how there was now a Cthulhu product up on D&D Beyond that's for 5th edition D&D. And then, a couple months ago, there was a Lord of the Rings product. And I was like, isn't it amazing that we have these intellectual properties for these major things, Lord of the Rings and the Lovecraftian stuff now on the same site as the core of D&D, to bring it together. And then this past week was another one, which was a Pathfinder product, a Paizo Pathfinder product being published on D&D Beyond. Like, you wouldn't expect that, but it is. And it's Abomination Vaults, which was a 5th edition product already, but was updated for D&D 2024, specifically for this implementation on D&D Beyond. I don't really know anything about it. I know it is very big. It is a big product. It is also an expensive product at $49.99 for the digital version. So just to have the Abomination Vaults on D&D Beyond is the same price as like the 2025 Monster Manual physically. right? The physical book. So that seems really high in cost, but it is a great big thing. I can guess why one of the reasons is that it's so high, and that's because Wizards of the Coast has taken a pretty good size cut, right? I'm making an assumption. I have no idea if it's true, but 70-30 seems to be the normal thing, which means like if you are selling this on D&D Beyond and you're expecting a price to come in for it, well, 70%, you're going to get 70% of the take instead of, if you're selling it off your own website, you make roughly 95-ish%, give or take, credit card transaction fees and some other stuff, that you're putting it out on here. I have a lot of thoughts about that. So some folks in Twitch are saying like, is D&D Beyond becoming drive-through RPG? Someone else said, is D&D Beyond becoming Steam? There's a big difference between D&D Beyond and drive-through RPG and D&D Beyond and Steam. And that is the number one products on this site are being published by the creator of the site, by the owner of the site, which means Abomination Vaults, this big adventure path, is actually a competitor to the adventures that Wizards of the Coast publishes on the same platform, and they don't have to pay the fee, which means this is $49, but if Wizards of the Coast was publishing this, they could do it for 30% less. So it's not I have this argument and people disagree with me and you can disagree with me and that's cool. It is not a fair publishing platform for publishers. There are two things. I've had this conversation with a lot of friends. There are many reasons why it is not a fair publishing platform. I will rattle some off to you, right? One, they have access to all of the data and you maybe only have access to the data for the thing that you're publishing on there. Two, you have no idea how your competitors are doing on the same platform. A drive-through RPG has medals. You can tell, this product type, this product from this group, they had so many sales. Steam, I think, tells you how well things rank. You get an idea of the sales of other things. So if you're publishing there, you know what kind of thing am I publishing and how does it do? There's nothing about sales on D&D Beyond. You have no idea how well these products are selling, which means they could say, hey, they could tell you anything, right? They could, if you were a publisher, they could tell you how well you're going to make. So that's a problem. You don't have access to your customers, but Wizards of the Coast does, right? So every time somebody is buying Abomination Vaults, their email address and all their information, Wizards has access to be able to market to for other Wizards products. You know who doesn't have access to that marketing stuff? Paizo. They don't have access to the same. I'm almost sure that's true. I seriously doubt Wizards of the Coast is giving Paizo access to the actual list of customers that bought that thing. So they don't have access to it, but the top of the platform does. They don't, like I said, they don't have any access to the data. So there's all of these areas where it's like, it's not a fair publishing platform because you're directly competing with the people who own the platform. That's the big difference between like Steam and drive-through. Drive-through RPG, for example, doesn't have their own role-playing game that they're selling on their platform that is by far the dominant product on the platform. That is absolutely the case with D&D Beyond, right? That is a very big difference in how that operates. And now we're also the rates, right? The idea that Wizards of the Coast can undersell a product because they don't have to pay themselves a 30% fee, right? They don't have to do a cut. So that means that products from other publishers either have to dramatically lower their price for D&D Beyond in order to compete with the stuff that's on D&D Beyond, or they charge $50 for a digital product that you actually don't own. We're going to get into ownership in D&D Beyond here in a minute. But there are two reasons. So why, Mike? But they're still publishing there. Paizo's a smart company. These are smart companies. They're still publishing there. Why, if it's such an unfair thing? Two reasons, right? The first is it's not exclusive. They can publish here and they can still publish everywhere else. In fact, Abomination Vaults not only is on here, you can also get the Abomination Vaults directly off the Paizo website in a PDF for less, for $9 less. So it's cheaper to buy it on Paizo's website as a PDF, which you actually own, than it is to get it on, I'm sorry, not $9, my mistake, $19 cheaper, $20 less to buy it directly from Paizo because they don't have to pay the fee, right? They don't have to pay this fee. $50 on D&D Beyond, $31 PDF from their own site. Guess which one I recommend you go buy? If you're going to buy Abomination Vaults, guess which one I suggest you go pick it up. Right there. Pick up that one. Get in a PDF so you own it. Also, it's a lot less money. So it's not exclusive, which means there's no reason not to put your stuff up there because you can also sell it in other places. Two, so far, from what I've heard, I've talked to publishers who have published stuff there, and everyone's under a non-disclosure agreement. That's the other issue. You're under a non-disclosure agreement when you make an agreement with Wizards to do this kind of thing. You don't get to talk to anybody about it. You can't describe rates. You can't negotiate for better rates. Drive-through RPG, at least you know what the percentage is. Steam, you know what the percentage is, right? You can have those conversations. We don't know what kind of deals are going on. No one knows, and you only know the deal that you have with them. But so why do it? Money. It makes a lot of money. It is a big driver. So all this other stuff that I talk about, publishers are probably aware of it. Maybe they're aware of it. Maybe they're not. Maybe they're not thinking about it, right? Maybe they're like, whatever. All they're seeing are great big dollar signs in their eyes. And the dollar signs are, if you're there, you have access. Because right now, Wizards of the Coast is sending out emails to all of their customers about these new products. They're doing it now, right? Will they continue to do it as more and more products come out? I don't know. Right? Like if they're trying to be Steam and if they're trying to be drive-through does not send emails to every single customer on drive-through of every new product that shows up. No, you're in a giant pile of new products and there's new products showing up 5 times, 10, 20 times a day. When we get to that point, when they become Steam, when they become drive-through, they're not going to be marketing those new products the same way. And that money is going to drop off. It's not going to be as worth it to publish on D&D Beyond because there's so many products. So it's really interesting, but I think this is a good case of showing, when another publisher, especially, and again, it's a big deal that Paizo is publishing there. It's also really good that you can get it elsewhere. And you can see it's $9 cheaper. It's $19 cheaper to get it in PDF, right? That's a big deal. So, I was digitally at the summit 2 years ago when Dan Dawson, who was, I don't know, I can never remember what anybody's role is over there. He was a big cheese in the Wizards of the Coast. And he said, would you like to be able to publish your products on D&D Beyond? And the whole place was like, yes, we totally want to do it. And he said, we're going to do it. And he made a big wahoo. He was like, wahoo. And I was like, that wahoo was dollar signs in his eyes. Because he knows we get to get 30% of the take of every RPG product as long as we can figure out how to get them on D&D Beyond, right? We're going to be, it doesn't matter whether or not we're making products or other people making products, we're going to make them. And I was like, I don't know that that's a good thing for the hobby. Like, I don't think that's necessarily good for publishers. And I don't think it's necessarily good for the hobby overall. It's really good for Wizards. They're in a really good spot. But is that good for everybody else? I don't really know. I don't know. I mean, again, non-exclusivity is a huge deal. If it was exclusive, that wouldn't be great. The Call of Cthulhu thing, though, that we talked about last week is exclusive. Now, it's exclusive, I think, because Chaosium decided not to publish it any other way. But I think they still could if they wanted to. So non-exclusivity is a huge benefit of D&D Beyond's thing. And I don't think it would work at all if it was exclusive. I don't think you'd see any of this stuff up there if it was an exclusive thing. And right now, I think people are making a lot of money on it. I know people are making a lot of money on it. How long will that last? And in the end, could you end up becoming dependent upon that? I think that's a problem. I know people who have been publishing products on there where the timelines for getting their stuff on D&D Beyond has been changing their design work. So the products are different because of the timelines to publish on D&D Beyond. That means the products are changing because of this. Is that good for us? I don't really know. Yeah, so that's one little take. I got more takes though. Are you ready? So then we have another one. So we learned of some new exclusive products that are going to be released alongside the physical and D&D Beyond versions of the new Forgotten Realms books that are coming out. There's a Forgotten Realms Heroes of Faerun and a Forgotten Realms Adventures in Faerun book that are coming out. One is player focused, one is GM focused. They are available, of course, physically and on D&D Beyond. But we learned that there's actually going to be 3 additional D&D Beyond only. People are calling them DLCs. And they're using that as a pejorative. Except they are not even a DLC because you cannot download them. We're gonna dive into this as we have before, but we're gonna dive into it again because there's reasons. And so there's 3 products. They've only announced what 2 of the products are. One of them is called Astarion's Book of Hungers. Right? Astarion Books of Hunger is a digital expansion that sinks its teeth. Man, the vampire metaphors in this thing. Sinks its teeth in the vampire themed storytelling. Dungeon masters and players alike will find new character options, including the Dampier species. That's not new. We got that in Van Richten's guide. We're going to talk about that in a bit. 18 feats and 3 vampiric backgrounds, perfect for adding gothic flair to your campaign. So a bunch of character stuff that is only available digitally and is only available on D&D Beyond, right? New character options, new species, new feats, new backgrounds, only available on D&D Beyond. Book offers powerful DM tools, new monster stat blocks for devil-worshipping vampires. You know how much I love vampires, so it makes me sad that these are only going to be on D&D Beyond. Bite-sized adventures. Hey, look, more vampire metaphors. Where players team up with Asterion and a fully detailed map and backstory for Asterion's favorite tavern. What I love is like, oh, team up with Asterion. And Michelle was like, I hate Asterion. Like, I don't want to team up with him. Build a bloody new campaign. A bloody new campaign. Very good. Isn't that like a swear word in Europe? Build a bloody new campaign or step into Asterion's shadowy past with the digital expansion. Okay, so that's interesting because it's a bunch of character options. I think it's the first time we've seen significant character options published by Wizards of the Coast only on D&D Beyond. It's the only way you can get them. They are not in any source book. There's no other way to get them other than on D&D Beyond. Netherill's Fall. This one makes me kind of mad. What is Netherill's Fall? Netherill's Fall is a digital expansion that lets the adventurers journey back in time to one of Forgotten Realms' most storied empires. This expansion includes the tools you need to play Dungeons & Dragons adventures set in the ancient Netheril, long-fallen empire in the Forgotten Realms. Step through time-traveling gates to explore the arcane wonders of High and Low Netheril, complete with city maps, gazetteers, and new magic items that were previously lost to history. Dive into adventures set during the iconic Netherese events and face terrifying new monsters, including several new Farum. Whether you're a time-traveling hero, lore-seeking, or a lore seeker uncovering forgotten knowledge, Netherill's Fall offers a rich, unforgettable glimpse in the legendary past. And then they say, and we got a third one, and they're coming out. So some folks were kind of mad because it looked like the only way you could get these was by buying the very expensive Ultimate Bundle, which costs $160. So it's $160 to get both books in physical form, both books on D&D Beyond, and these 3 other D&D Beyond only things together. $160, which is, it's a lot, right? That's expensive. It also gives the maps and stuff are also a part of D&D maps. We're going to talk about D&D maps. I got like 500 bookmarks now on this topic. So that seemed very expensive. My understanding, though, is they said they are going to sell them separately. So if you want to buy them later, you can go to D&D Beyond. You can buy each of those accessories later. You can buy the ones you want. So here's something that chaps my ass about it, though, which is one of the things that was immediately disappointing to me when I heard about the Forgotten Realms. I'm mostly interested in the Adventures book, right? Because I'm a DM and Adventures in Faerun is what interests me. Was that they have these 5 detailed gazetteers, and 2 of the 5 are places they have already sold to me twice before, right? Icewind Dale, I'm so tired of Icewind Dale. I ran an entire 2 full campaigns in Icewind Dale. 3, I'm sorry. I've run 3 Icewind Dale campaigns based on material that they have sold me in the past. I already, at the beginning of 5th edition, I got the Icewind Dale Legacy of the Crystal Shard, which also included a gazetteer of Icewind Dale. And then, of course, we got Rime of the Frostmaiden, which I wasn't crazy about as an adventure anyway, but it already had a gazetteer of Icewind Dale, and I ran it for 2 groups. I've already played the hell out of Icewind Dale. Baldur's Gate have you heard of Baldur's Gate? I don't know if I've ever heard of Baldur's Gate before. Is there a Baldur's Gate? What is that? Oh, that's right. It's the system that they're like squeezing out. Oh my God. Baldur's Gate. So I had Murder in Baldur's Gate, which was another adventure that they sold at the beginning of the 5th edition time. And I ran that campaign. And then I had Baldur's Gate Descent into Avernus, where they managed to take Baldur's Gate and with a giant pestle mashed it into the adventure Descent into Avernus just so that they could have the words Baldur's Gate on the front in order to tie into Baldur's Gate 3, which has been done to death. I don't need another gazetteer of Baldur's Gate, and I don't need another gazetteer of Icewind Dale. The third, they also have the Moonshae Isles, but some excellent writers already wrote about the Moonshae Isles for previously published Wizards of the Coast writers, wrote about the Moonshae Isles for Baldman Games, which is available on DM's Guild. So if I wanted to run Moonshae, I have plenty of Moonshae lore to dive into as well, which means only 2 of those 5 settings are settings that I really want. And another setting I'd really love to be in the book would be the Netherese Empire. That would have been really nice. And instead, they took the Netherese Empire and they make it a D&D Beyond only exclusive. That sucks, right? Like that was actually a new thing that I was going to be interested in, and now it's only on D&D Beyond, and that means I don't own it. So that makes me angry, right? Like, and okay, but it's a product. They can do what they want. I can buy it or not buy it, right? That's fine. And I get it, right? This is all business, right? Business is business. They get to do what they want. The marketing team said, you got to put things in there that everybody's all heard of before. I know you've published them twice before. Put them in there again, and stuck it in there so that we can have Baldur's Gate on the front of everything until we squeezed every single dime out of the licensing agreement we had to do Baldur's Gate 3. I get it. I still would have loved more stuff. I look back at the old 3rd edition Forgotten Realms book that I own. I have it on hand. A friend of mine was like, this 3rd edition version of the Forgotten Realms book is the best Forgotten Realms book that's ever been made. It's really, really good. It is packed with stuff, and it wasn't just focused on the same places that they focused on all the other time. I, of course, will be taking a look at this when it comes out, but there is that. Okay, so that is the downloadable content. Then tied into this is Dan Ayoub. So Dan Ayoub is the new Dungeons & Dragons head of the D&D Dungeons & Dragons franchise. And 4 days ago, as of this recording, he published a note on D&D Beyond where he talked about, the name of the note is Welcome Back to the Table, D&D's New Direction. And he has kind of 4 main points in this discussion. Point number 1 is a system that belongs to you. 2 is a stronger SRD, step by step. 3 is run your D&D Beyond content in maps, no subscription required. And 4 is from the community for the community. And there's kind of discussions of all of this. I read it, and then I took some notes, and I have some specific parts of this that I want to talk about and address, and actually offer, if I were asked by Wizards of the Coast, what can they do in this area? I have one thing that I would offer, which will come as no surprise to you. And if you've been following my stuff at all. And then one kind of big problem I think they have that I don't know how to address. So those are 2 things that I would offer, which I'll get to in the end. But I wanted to kind of step into this thing. So welcome back. Who's the new guy here? I've been here. I never left. I've been running D&D, right? I've been running their D&D games, including D&D 2014, 2024, their adventure paths, for the last 10 years, right? I didn't leave, right? So what do you welcome me back from? I didn't go anywhere. So maybe it's because it's not for me. They're trying to welcome back people, bring people back in who have left. Okay. But this is something that I was thinking about this morning. This is something that Wizards has done before, which actually kind of made me a little angry before and made other people angry before. During 4th edition, it was very clear that lots of people are very angry at Wizards of the Coast for the direction that 4th edition took. But some of us played and enjoyed 4th edition. We liked a lot of the things that we got. And one of the things was like, we felt like the second class citizens. Right? The people that were still there, that were still playing D&D, weren't listened to at all. And a lot of people complained that, hey, there were good things that were in 4th edition that would have been nice to see in 5th edition, but 5th edition focused so much on the people who left that they ignored the people who were still there. Is that going on now too? Where it's like, hey, those of us who have been playing 5th edition D&D all this time, are we not the target audience anymore? The target audience are all the people that got mad and walked away? Is that who you're going after? What about us, right? I'm still here, right? So welcome back was an interesting statement because I never left. But maybe it's not about me because they already have me. They don't need to worry about Mike Shea, right? They need to worry about the people who left and are going back. And that gets into my thing. So that was one of the things they said, welcome back. And then, so this one, a system that belongs to you. Well, no, it doesn't. Not according to the D&D Beyond end user license agreement. If I buy the system on D&D Beyond, it very specifically does not belong to me. The acquisition, this is a direct quote from the terms and conditions of D&D Beyond. The acquisition of digital content does not give you ownership rights. Instead, you are granted a limited, non-exclusive, non-transferable license to use the digital content for personal, non-commercial entertainment purposes only. We reserve the right to revoke this license at any time without prior notice or liability. We reserve the right to discontinue or modify any part of our service or subscription options at any time at our discretion. Your license to use digital content is defined by several key restrictions. 1, it's non-exclusive, non-assignable, non-transferable, and can be revoked by us at any time if your account is terminated. We retain the full authority to manage, alter, or even remove digital content as deemed necessary without owing you any compensation. By engaging with digital content, you acknowledge and accept that you hold no ownership or property rights to any items you have access and will not be held liable for any loss or changes made to those items. And then there's an interesting one at the end, which I think, Dan, if we're offering recommendations, we aim to eventually open client protocols to facilitate user engagement without the need for reverse engineering or similar techniques. That would be awesome. Do that. I think that's probably been in there for years. I'll bet you that's in there from the time when Curse owned it, and they haven't gotten it out of the license agreement yet. So do we own it? Not really. Yes, we do. Like, if luckily this version does not have an end user license agreement, but the stuff that they're really focused on, those new Forgotten Realms things, we don't own those. You will never own those because they're only available on D&D Beyond. You can never own them according to their own license agreement. The license agreement you agree to when you buy it says you do not own it, does not give you ownership rights. So why am I picking on that, right? I'm picking on it because it says a system that belongs to you. Does not belong to me. It belongs to us in some ways, but in the way that they're really focused on, which is D&D Beyond, it does not belong to us. This upgrade, so this was in the note, right? It says this upgrade doesn't replace the previous rules. It enhances them. That was within 4 days of putting out a product that said, hey, we're going to sell you the Dampier again. Do you want the Dampier race? We know we already gave it to you in Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft. We're giving it to you again. We're going to sell it to you again. Isn't that great? That replaces the rules. You're replacing the rules. That's exactly what you're doing, right? So that part of this is like the hypocrisy of like, hey, within a couple of days, we're saying like, hey, here's a product that you can pay us money for, but you will never actually own. But it's a system that belongs to you. Also, these are just a revision of the rules, but also we're rewriting all the rules. We're going to sell you the Artificer for the 3rd time. We're going to sell you Dampier again. We're selling you all this stuff again that they've already sold us. Isn't it? If it's compatible, it's compatible. If it's not, it's not. Why? If it's compatible, why are you going through such effort to sell us new versions of the same stuff we already bought? Improvements to the SRD was one of them, and I have no complaints on this one, right? Stronger SRD. Alongside the content provided in new core books, we're updating the system reference document on a rolling basis. We're committed to long-term access and support for resources through the errata process. This ensures the SRD will remain up to date with the latest standards and mechanics for creators' use. Great. Sounds good. I don't know what that means, right? It's a lot of words to say we're maybe one day we'll add more stuff. Is that new content? Are we going to get new monsters in there? Are we going to get new spells in there? Are we going to get new stuff in there that then actually does, at that point, belong to us? Because that belongs to us, right? The system reference document belongs to us. That is, we now have a license to be able to use that anywhere just by referencing it. So, hey, I'm all about the SRD. And I think what Wizards of the Coast putting out the SRD was wonderful. And you know what I would really like to see for it are the multiple language versions. They did multiple language versions of the 5.1 SRD. I would love to see multiple language versions of the 5.2.1 SRD. But also I'd love to see more stuff in it, but they are under no obligation to add new stuff. So I'm not pressing them on this. I'm like, oh, is it just errata update? Because they say the errata process, which means, oh, we're going to update it as we fix things. Okay, good. I'm glad you were doing that. And if they never add anything new to it, okay, like it's not, they didn't make a promise that they're going to add lots of new stuff to it. They did make a promise to put it out, and they fulfilled that promise. And I am 100% on board with that. So, I have no complaints at all on that. Here's the other one, and it gets into the D&D Beyond thing I was talking about before. Run your D&D Beyond content on maps, no subscription required. So this is kind of being sold as a clearly good thing for everybody. Now, everybody can use the D&D Maps tool without having to have a subscription to the site. Isn't that great? Maybe. Like, it's fine, but is it a benefit to the hobby? I don't think so. And it's not a benefit to the hobby because I will ask you, here's the way to determine whether or not it's a benefit to the hobby or not. Why is Wizards doing that? And the answer, what benefit does that have for Wizards? And the answer is more accounts and more people that are using their centralized tool in order to run their games, which means they're more likely to buy the digital stuff in order to run on that tool, which means the more stuff they buy on that tool, the more stuff in the future they'll buy from that tool, and the less likely it is for them to ever want to move to another tool or move somewhere else. That every product you buy on D&D Beyond is a stronger reason to stay with D&D Beyond, regardless of what they do with it. Right? This is something that I worry about. I talk about it on the show a lot, and I'm going to talk about it now. And be aware, right? Think back to the EULA that we just read. All that stuff you quote unquote buy, you don't own. You don't own shit, right? You own nothing from that stuff. You are renting and leasing, and they were very, very clear in that license agreement, the illegal license agreement. You don't own anything, and they can change it whenever they want, including taking it down. Oh, but Mike, they're never going to take down D&D Beyond. Are you kidding me? They'll never do that. That's like their big thing. They totally did. They've killed lots of stuff. This is not theoretical. Wizards of the Coast kills stuff all the time. Wizards.com/D&D, which had tons of articles and tons of information from the designers there, tons of historical stuff, is gone. It's all gone. Hundreds of thousands of words of the design of 3rd, 4th, 5th edition D&D. All those words are gone. Chris Perkins wrote tons of articles. Mike Merles, tons of articles. Ray Winninger, tons of articles. They're all gone. Luckily you can find copies on like archive.org and other places, but it's not on the site anymore. And when you talk to them about it, they look at you like deers in the headlights. They're like, really? I remember my friend Teos was at the summit that they did, and he mentioned to them, all that stuff is gone. And they're like, really? Like they didn't even occur to them. They don't care because they don't care about the past, right? They just don't. They're just all about the future. They have 2 different 4th edition tool sets that were like D&D Beyond for 4th edition, right? One of them was a downloadable tool set to help you build characters locally, which is awesome. And one of them was an online tool that let you use all of the data that they were putting out. Both of them are gone. They spent millions of dollars on that stuff. Gone. That stuff does not exist anymore. More recently, they bought Dragon Magazine back from Paizo and then started publishing it themselves through another company. And then one day said, we're shutting it off. And not only are we shutting it off, every issue of Dragon Plus that was made is gone. I wrote stuff for that. I have lots of friends that wrote stuff for that. You cannot find it anywhere. I don't even think, because of the way that it was kind of wired into an app, we get into apps, it's gone. Like, that stuff's not even available on archive.org. All of that material, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of articles that Wizards paid for, that were given to Wizards customers, totally gone, right? Platform decay already happens. It's already happening, right? Platform decay is already happening in D&D Beyond. I don't know the details of it because I don't spend a lot of time on it, but people are buying accessories on D&D Beyond, like the Lord of the Rings set, and the stuff is not being implemented the way they expect it. They were buying products up there that only worked with D&D 2014 and had an expectation they would work with D&D 2024. And there's lots of, it's complicated on how to do that. That's called platform decay. They're putting products up there faster than than the system can stay updated to support them, because it's more interesting for them. This is that stage 2 of enshittification, right? They are bringing more products in to have better support for business products, to expand it out as wide as possible, putting Paizo on there, putting Chaosium on there, putting Lord of the Rings on there, right? Putting all of these other publishers on there so that they can try to be Steam and they can try to be, drive-through RPG, kinda. But the system underneath it is 2 generations old of old spaghetti legacy code, and they're not able to keep up. And who's going to suffer for that? Customers, you guys, right? So this is happening right now. One thing I saw, and I saw this, I talked about when Dan Rawson was super excited about bringing third-party publishers onto D&D Beyond, is the times that I've seen the executives over there talking about this, they don't even understand this stuff, right? They don't even really they're so focused on what they have right now and the expansion that they're interested in. They can't even see a world outside of it. And an example was, I saw this a while ago, and I didn't really talk about it, but I'm bringing it up now because it's relevant to this conversation. So Jess Lanzillo, who now is over at White Wolf, but she was the former head of D&D for about a year. And there was an interview that was done with her from comicbooks.com. Christian Hoffer did a really, really good interview. And at one of the questions of the interview, which I thought was really telling, and I'm bringing it up for Jess Lanzillo, but I have seen other people and gotten the impression from other people at Wizards of the Coast that this is still kind of going on, that the view is so myopic that they can't see the world outside of it. So here is the question, and this is paraphrase, right? There's direct quotes, but there's paraphrasing from Christian Hoffer. So Christian Hoffer said, "We asked Lanzillo to talk about the recurring fears of digitization within Dungeons & Dragons and whether there was any mandated shift to digital," right? This was back last year when there was lots of talk of like, oh my God, are you going to be putting products up on D&D Beyond that are only available on D&D Beyond? Are you going to be digitizing D&D? Well, that would never happen. Oh, wait a minute. We just saw 3 products that are coming out that are only available on D&D, on D&D Beyond. Okay. But anyway, so now we've seen this come true. But we asked Lanzillo to talk about the recurring fears of digitization within Dungeons & Dragons and whether there was any mandated shift to digital. I think it's unfortunate that this dichotomy has been set up, Lanzillo said. It's artificial in so many ways. How did most of us play D&D during lockdown? Was it necessarily everyone's preferred playing it? Hard to say. Some people found they've continued to play digitally. They're playing on maps on D&D Beyond and on Discord and on voice calls. Many of us play in person, a more tactile experience. I was probably one of the last migrators to D&D Beyond character sheet because I'm an artist, so I just drew all my stuff, and I want to do this in a very bespoke fashion. I'm a big fan of being able to provide play experiences to those who want them. I actually look at this as a form of gatekeeping, to be like, your version of playing is stupid and my version of playing is good. So the question was, is there a mandate within Hasbro to focus on Dungeons & Dragons for digital? And her answer was that the translation was, your version of playing is stupid and my version is playing is good, is what she heard. We're not talking about digital play versus physical play at all. I'm getting all jacked up. I drink my coffee. We weren't talking about digital versus physical. I am all about digital play, but I'm about owning our products. And the question here is like, is there a big myopic focus on D&D Beyond? And I saw it here. I saw it with Dan Rawson when he was talking at the summit, right? there is this feeling that D&D Beyond is digital play. It is the only one. They're not seeing anything else. They're not realizing, like, with Foundry, we actually own the stuff that we buy. When we buy PDFs, which are digital, we can use them digitally or physically, and we own the PDFs. That's what we're talking about. So there's this mischaracterization. I remember reading this. I was like, oh, I'm so mad about this. But I was like, I'm not going to, it was one focus. I wasn't going to talk about it at the time. But the issue here is like that is a mischaracterization of the question at all. But I have one 4-character solution to offer Dan Ayoub. So Jess Lanzillo is now over at White Wolf, where they actually make PDFs of their products. Oh, spoiler, right? So I bet she's all about selling PDFs now. 4 characters, 4 letters that I can offer that can be a big solution to a lot of this. So the last thing on the note was there was a thing about the community roundtable. There's a big thing about the community roundtable, and the community roundtable. Hey, we'll see. But the question is, who gets chosen and how? And I know that sounds like, oh, I'm going to be mad if I'm not chosen. No, I think there's a lack of transparency with this kind of thing. There was before. It wasn't clear who got picked and why. It wasn't clear exactly what kind of problems they wanted the group to fix. Like, this is the problem from last year's summit. So one thing I would highly recommend to Dan Ayoub, or anybody that's listening that talks to Dan Ayoub, is, hey, go look at what happened with the previous summit. Read Teos's article on AlphaStream about what happened at the summit. Listen to the videos that people had and think about what happened with the summit when they tried to bring a community roundtable before, because I think it was a mess. It was a mess. And what problem are they aiming to fix? What do they expect to hear? And what will they do with the stuff they hear about that they don't really want to hear about? Right? What's going to happen with this? Like, how are they going to handle that? So those are all questions I have about this idea of bringing a community roundtable back together. But now here's what I think is the big problem that Wizards is facing right now with Dungeons and Dragons. I think it might be the biggest issue that they're facing, which is some people just don't really dig D&D 2024, right? It is a brand new version of the book that came out. They spent millions of dollars coming out. And I actually dig it, right? I'm actually on board. I mean, I'm not like a super fan. Oh my God, it's the best thing ever. But I'm like, well, to me, so far, having played all the versions of 5e, it's my favorite version of 5e. Right? I really like it. It's clean. I think they fixed a lot of the problems that I had with the old version. I think the monsters are really good. There's lots of stuff I like, but my opinion is not common. I don't know if it's common. I don't really know where it is. But I have friends who the very things that I like about the game are the things they don't like about it, and they don't want to play it, right? And these are people who have loved D&D their whole lives, and they're not interested. Right? They're not interested in playing it. That's a big problem. And I don't think their view is independent. I don't think, like, I've talked to designer friends of mine. I've talked to other players. I've talked to a lot of people. And there's a lot of people that are either really indifferent to it or don't like it. And I don't know what you do about that, given that it just came out. Right? I don't know. If I were in Dan Ayoub's shoes, I'm not sure how I would solve that problem. Right? The obvious answer is, I guess we do another edition, but you can't do that right now. It's got to be at least a couple of years. And really, like, what does that say? Right? And then what edition are you going to try to come up with that's better than the one you just did? Right? That's really a big question. So I don't know what to do with that, but I think that might be the biggest problem that they're facing right now. I mean, Wizards of the Coast has a very bad reputation issue going on with D&D, which I think is why this thing was written. And this idea of like wanting to rebuild trust. And you're like, I'm not even sure what problem you're trying to solve. What trust issue are you actually trying to address? But in particular, I think you have a problem that there's a lot of people out there who were happy with D&D 2014, and they look at D&D 2024, and it's not grabbing them. And I don't know what you do about that. So what advice would I offer? It's the same advice I would offer. For crying out loud, release PDFs of your products. Every other publisher does it. Paizo is doing it. White Wolf is doing it. Even another giant publicly traded company, which is the company that makes Warhammer, Games Workshop, another publicly traded company, they also release their products in PDF. I get it. Oh, piracy, right? Piracy is the worry. I have bad news for you, my friend. Your stuff's already pirated. It's already out there. Do you want my legitimate money? Do you want people's legitimate money? Because you can get it, and I guarantee you, I guarantee you, Wizards of the Coast, if you put your products up on the DMs Guild, if you put PDFs of your products up in the DMs Guild, you will immediately make money. And I bet you if you look at the revenue on your other systems, I bet you it doesn't go down. I'd be willing to take a bet on that. I'm not willing to cover your company for you if it doesn't go that way. But I bet you're going to just see money coming in. And you already know the answer because you've seen it with DMs Guild with all the classic stuff that you put up there. I bet you that's making some pretty good revenue for you, right? All that stuff. And that stuff was all pirated like crazy before because it was the only way to get it, right? So give us a legitimate way to get the product we want in the format we want. Every other RPG company does it. Every other one. There is only one reason why Wizards of the Coast isn't publishing their stuff in PDF. And that answer is they don't have to. They don't feel like they have to because they have D&D Beyond, because stuff is selling on D&D Beyond, because people are willing to accept a license agreement that says you never actually own any of the things you bought, right? They're willing to, they're like, we don't have to. But there's no good legitimate reason not to. There's no good legitimate reason not to. Small publishers, I publish everything I have in PDF and text and Markdown and EPUB with no DRM. And my stuff gets pirated. And you know what? I care more about my customers than I care about fighting pirates. That's really the question you have to ask. Do you care more about your customers, the people who legitimately want your products in a format that they can own, that they can use? Do you care more about them than you do about jackasses who are pirating your stuff, who are doing it anyway? So if I had one message, that would be the message. And wow, would that be a tremendous day if we started seeing products delivered in PDF? Because then I trust you. That is trust. You want to rebuild trust with me? Give me products that I can own. Digital versions of products that I can own. That's the trust that I particularly want. It is really easy for us to get caught up in the vast worlds that we are able to kind of piece together out of the ether and watch evolve with our friends around the table. And it's part of one of the reasons why I think Return of the Lazy Dungeon Master is as successful a book as it is because I offered one tiny little raft that you could grab onto in this giant sea of sort of untamed waters of the creativity of RPGs. But what if we can narrow it down even more, right? Sometimes I feel like narrowing down the scope of what we're trying to do when we're preparing for our game, recognizing the vast creativity helps us get out of the paralysis and the worry of the game that we're going to run. And one of the things that kind of occurs to me is that typically when we're running our game and we're getting ready to run our game, what we're really talking about are 5 scenes. Right? We're running 5 scenes in our game. 5 scenes assumes that you're running a game of roughly 3 to 4 hours, right? And we can think of a scene as basically any situation. They call them encounters in D&D, but the encounters often gets tied up with combat encounters. But typically, I would argue, and I have seen some data on this, that a scene takes roughly 45 minutes of gameplay to run. That's going to vary, of course, by the number of players that you've got, the type of game that you're running, of course, the type of scene that you're running. But generally speaking, I think if you were to kind of aim the idea that it takes up, that a scene is going to take up about 45 minutes, some will be shorter and some will be longer, then you have an idea about how many scenes that you're actually going to be able to run in the game that you're going to run. So that focus on like, okay, hey, I've got a game and it's coming up in 45 minutes and there's going to be basically 5 scenes, right? What might those scenes be? Now I'm going to draw a big underline under one of the words in that statement. What might the next 5 scenes of my game be like? Which is the word might. One of the things we love about RPGs is we don't really know where they're going to go. So I don't know that these will be the next 5 scenes. I think they might be the next 5 scenes. But if I've prepared these scenes and thought about them and built the components around them to get this idea of what those scenes are going to be like, then I could probably break them apart and reshift them into a different kind of scene, depending on what happens in the game. Or I have the other tools that I need to be able to improvise scenes as I run, which is why we have the other 8 steps. And the 8 steps are really to give you the components to be able to improvise scenes. But I think this focus on like, hey, I have a game coming up. What are the 5 scenes that could take place in that game? Helps us refine our thought process for the game prep that we've got. And this is something we can actually see in the D&D 2024 Dungeon Master's Guide with the very short adventure outlines that they have in there. My immediate reaction to those are way too small. Like those adventure prompts are way too small. But I thought about them a lot and I'm like, I kind of like them. And I kind of like them because it shows how little you might need to actually run your game. I think that that's valuable to show. I'm not sure it has everything in there, but friend of the show, Elizabeth over at Patchwork Paladin, she actually took some of those things and broke them down to say, what are the different steps from Return of the Lazy Dungeon Master that exist in those 5 scenes? What secrets do they reveal? What NPCs are involved? What monsters do they fight? What locations are they in? And then that kind of showed that many of those had those sort of things kind of embedded in the scene. And that's something I've been thinking a lot about since then, which is the idea that sometimes we can pack the other 8 steps or parts of the other 8 steps in those 5 scenes that we're going to run in our game. So scenes can be all different kinds of things. They can include locations, they can include NPCs, they can include monsters. One scene in some circumstances can cover 4 steps from Return of the Lazy Dungeon Master in one thing. Because your first scene is your strong start. So one of the steps being the strong start. If your first scene is your strong start, you've now covered 2 steps in one. I know that it's a scene, and I know that it's a strong start. If it includes a particular NPC, now you've got an NPC in there. If it includes monsters, you have monsters in there. If it's at a set location, you have locations in there. So now you have 5 steps covered in one scene, right? That's pretty interesting. That means you can pack a lot of stuff in there. It is very important to recognize that sometimes the scenes are not going to play out the way you think, or they might not run out at all. So you don't want to do too much heavy prep on a scene. You don't want like a half a page of text that covers all of the stuff happening in a scene. You really want that scene to be broken down into the components you need in order to be able to improvise play when it happens at your table. And you better be ready to throw that scene out. And you better have enough information available to you to build other scenes to fill in depending on where the characters go and what they do. And this is why we break out those other 8 steps: monsters, treasure, NPCs, locations, and secrets and clues. Those are split out so that you can drop those pieces and create scenes as you're running it. So even though you might say, yeah, I've got 5 scenes in my next game, you better be ready to throw one or more of those scenes out. And depending on the game you're running, you'll know which scenes are very likely to occur and which scenes may not occur at all. You know, think about a dungeon where the characters can go different paths. You probably know how they're going to start getting into the dungeon, and you might know where they're going to start at the next session, and you probably know where the end of the dungeon is going to be, but you may not know exactly what path they're going to take. So those middle scenes might be the ones that you toss out. Scenes can also get complicated. Sometimes you have a scene that has a tree where there could be 3 possible scenes after the one scene you ran. Right? I would be careful going overboard. Do not build giant network trees of possible scenes and interactions and arrows going back and forth. Don't complicate your life too much. If there are possible scenes, you can make a list of these are possible scenes and these could go in different ways. But don't go overboard with a giant network tree of possibilities. You definitely don't need that. But one of the things I often do where things get complicated is if I know that the final scene is sort of the end of a quest or the end of an adventure, I want to know what 3 quests might come up next. And one of the scenes could be next steps. What are the characters going to do after they're done with the thing? And what options are available to them? Those are handy scenes. Those are really outside of the 5 scenes. That's sort of like a 6th scene, which is next steps. What are you going to do after this? That tells you where you're going to go. So then you know what to prep next time. And then you can prep your 5 scenes for next time. So in the end, I think it's helpful to us to think about our games and refine things down by pondering the idea that really when we're sitting down at the table running a game for our friends, we're really going to be running 5 scenes. So if you think about your prep from the idea of what might those scenes be, with a huge underline under that word might, right? Recognizing that the game evolves and we need to be able to evolve with it. We're not forcing mono direction of 5 scenes. We are giving ourselves the material to be able to improvise, but we recognize that what we're going to be running at the table is very likely to be 5 scenes. I think it helps us refine down our prep. I think it helps us prepare to improvise. I think it, helps us avoid the paralysis of the massive world and the massive situation, the super complicated worlds that we're building that we love to watch unfold at the table with our friends. Every month on the Patreon, on the Sly Flourish Patreon, we have the Patreon Q&A. Every month, patrons are able to ask any question. I answer all of those questions every Friday. Some of those questions I bring here to the show so that we can dive in a bit deeper. So Liam M says, the 3-2-1 quest system intrigues. I also recently listened to an episode where you answered a question about roughly planning sessions and saying something to the effect of having your North Star /end goal. So my question is there a more organic way to implement the 3-2-1 quest system when your North Star /type of campaign doesn't lend itself to a job board type of system? For example, my group's current driving goal is to prevent the return of Orcus and prevent the broken wand of Orcus from being reassembled. Again, the tone doesn't quite lend itself to a job board style system, but players still have choices in how they would want to tackle the problem in the order. But the 3-2-1 system sounds like a great way to prep /present possible scenes. So I'm just confused about how to do that more organically. So yes, one thing to not hang on to too much. So what's the 3-2-1 quest system? The 3-2-1 quest system is essentially you put 3 quests in front of the characters and the players. The players pick one of those. They go off on that quest. They complete it. They come back and they see 2 quests remaining. They pick one of those. They go on that quest and come back. And the third one is thrown out. And now you have 3 new quests. Right? Some people say it's really more like a 3-2-3 quest system than it is a 3-2-1. That's true, but it's, 3 quests, 2 of them you do, 1 of them gets thrown out. That's why it's called the 3-2-1 quest system. And there, really, I got this idea from Dragon of Icespire Peak, which had this sort of different job board system. But don't get hung up on the job board part of it. The job board was just a vehicle for them to get quests. But in your campaign, they can get quests from a lot of different ways. Meeting NPCs, having quest driver NPCs, major NPCs that are able to give these quests, very common way. But a lot of times these quests are organic. They pick them up during the game. They pick them up as situations, secrets, and clues that they learn, other things that they pick up. The main thing with the 3-2-1 quest system is that you, generally speaking, want to have at different breaks in your game after they've completed, you want to know they have like 2 or 3 options about where they're going to go next. They can pick one of those and go on it, and the other 2 options are still available to them. They can pick one of those and you can throw the other one out. And you don't have to be too rigid with it. The basic thing is you want to make sure that they have choices in front of them, not too many. Somewhere between 2 and 3 is about, 2 or 3 quests is about right. 4, 5 is 6 is really probably too complicated. Now you have arguments and everyone wants to do a different one. It's a big pain in the ass. And you want to have a way to get quests out. So the idea, if you're looking at your Orcus and the Wand of Orcus thing, first of all, you want to have it so that, if the players get 1 piece of the Wand of Orcus, does that completely eliminate the threat? That's the 3 of 5 or 5 of 7 quest model problem. Make sure that, 1 failed quest doesn't result in the entire chain breaking. But you could say like, hey, a couple quests that are in front of the characters are getting a couple of the pieces of the Wand of Orcus. And then there's a third quest that might be dealing with the cultists of Orcus who are working on some other problem too. And the players can decide which one of those quests they want to take. So you can learn it from lots of different places. The way they get those quests can come from lots of different places. As you said, organically is really the key word. And it's kind of up to you to sort of have those in front of you. And like secrets and clues and the other aspects of Return of the Lazy Dungeon Master, you get to decide where you're going to drop those in. How are they going to learn them? Are they going to learn them from an NPC? Are they going to learn them from reading an old book? You could just tell them, hey, based on the research you did, you think another step of this thing is to do Y, because sometimes it's not super clear. So it actually helps us as GMs to tell the player specifically what quest they've picked up. And these could be self-generated quests. Matt Colville has talked about this, that sometimes these are self-generated quests where they've kind of, through all of the stuff that they're doing, they've come to a quest and then you articulate it and say, my understanding from what you guys said is that you want to do this. And that's now a quest, and you put that quest in front of them. But a key is also having those quests age out. So if they don't do the quest, it gets done. Other things in the world are moving on, and they're getting accomplished. Other cult groups are picking up the pieces of the Wand of Orcus while the characters are doing it. So if they don't do it, if the characters don't do it, then another group does. And you don't want the dial to be up too high on that they always feel like, oh man, I totally wanted to do those. If they really feel like they wanted to do all 3, maybe you find a way that they can still do all 3, right? You don't have to throw them out. So stay flexible with it. But you don't have to think about it as a job board. That's just kind of a convenient way to think about how the quests are there and how they operate, rather than the organic nature of the kind of quests that you run. But I'm running like the 3-2-1 quest models in a lot of the games that I run, and mine are very much like the kind of game that you're talking about, where there's a central North Star goal, the characters are headed towards that goal, but it's really about making sure there's multiple quests in front of them that are all leading towards that goal. In my Dragon Empire game, for example, destabilizing the Dragon Empire is the goal, right? Breaking the Dragon Empire. So all of the quests that they're doing need to relate to how is this helping to destabilize or break the Dragon Empire? Like, what is this doing to weaken the Dragon Empire? All of them have that goal, but the quests change and things occur and things shift as the world moves on. So Liam M., I hope that helps. Friends, I want to thank all of you for hanging out with me today where we talked about all things in tabletop role-playing games. If you enjoyed this show, please consider subscribing to the Sly Flourish newsletter. It is absolutely free to sign up. You get a free adventure generator for signing up, and you get a weekly RPG-related article with links to all of the other work that I do. You can also pick up any of my books at the Sly Flourish bookstore, including Return of the Lazy Dungeon Master, City of Arches, Forge of Foes, and more. And you can join the awesome Sly Flourish Patreon. It is very inexpensive to join. You get access to like the 5e artisanal monster database, including the map annotator that I showed. You get all kinds of stuff for joining the Patreon, our access to our Discord server, but most of all, you help me put on shows like this. To the patrons of Sly Flourish, thank you so much. Thank you, my friends. Have a great day, and get out there and play an RPG.